My sister's wedding reception. I gave my name, but the staff looked confused. Sorry, your name isn't on the list. Shocked, I asked my mother. She smirked. Did you really think you were invited? Strangers aren't allowed. I smiled calmly. Then I'll live like a stranger, and I walked away. But during the ceremony, my mother's phone started ringing non-stop. My name is Mary Wilson. I work as a nurse at a general hospital in the northern part of Chicago. The view of the city from the hospital windows shows different expressions with each season. I especially love the winter snow scenery. When pure white snow covers the city, the world seems just a little kinder. Today, after finishing my 12-hour shift, I dragged my tired body back to my apartment. When I opened the front door, a small shelf with my father's photograph greeted me. My father passed away from lung cancer 5 years ago. Every time I see his photograph with that warm smile, my chest tightens. I'm home, Papa. I speak to his picture as always. There's no reply, but I feel like his gentle eyes are watching over me. During my father's illness, I temporarily put my career on hold to become a full-time caregiver. My knowledge as a nurse was helpful, but the lessons I had learned from you need to value your own life more. That was one of the last things my father said to me. Looking back, I think he understood my personality well. I open the refrigerator and heat up yesterday's leftovers in the microwave. It's a simple dinner, but it's enough for tonight. While sitting at the table, I remember that I didn't answer my mother's call again today. My mother, Eleanor, has become increasingly harsh and critical since my father's death, especially toward me. On the other hand, she's unusually indulgent with my sister, Caitlin. This favoritism has continued since childhood, but while father was alive, there was balance. Now it's different. Mary, why do you wear such cheap clothes? Surely a nurse's salary could afford something better. Mary, you're really becoming like your father, stubborn and self-centered. Learn from Caitlin. At least she's thinking about her future. Mother's words always have thorns. No matter what I do, it's insufficient and wrong in her eyes. Sometimes her words hurt me to tears, but I'm used to it now. That's our relationship. I checked the mail placed on the table. Bills, advertisements, and I had hoped for a letter from Caitlin, but no. Communication from my sister has notably decreased in recent months. Caitlin graduated from law school and currently works at a major law firm in the city. Much of Caitlin's college expenses came from father's insurance money and my savings. I chose to prioritize my sister's future over my own career. I don't regret it. I want Caitlin to have a wonderful life, and now she's making that happen. A few months ago, I heard that Caitlin got engaged to Ryan Johnson, a lawyer at the same firm, not directly, but through a phone call from mother. Caitlin is engaged to Ryan. Isn't it wonderful? He's a graduate from a top university, a promising young lawyer. The first success story in our family. Mother's words contained an unspoken message, not you. I'm just a nurse. In her eyes, I don't appear to be successful. Since the engagement news, I've heard that wedding preparations are underway. However, I haven't received an invitation. At first I thought it might be a mail delay or something, but as days pass my anxiety grows. Being family, I should naturally be invited, or so I wanted to believe. Mary, she's busy. Wedding preparations are demanding, you know. That was Mother's response when I finally got up the courage to call and ask last week. I can't reach Caitlin herself. Messages or calls from her are rare. I tell myself it's because she's busy. I pick up my smartphone and look at the last text message from Caitlin. It's from 3 months ago. Thank you, Mary. I was really happy. Ryan also liked your present. Let's meet soon. Since then, soon has never arrived. Strangely enough, I've built a good relationship with Ryan's family, particularly with his mother, Barbara, whom I met by chance through a mutual acquaintance and hit it off with. Barbara is a former nurse who now works for a healthcare-related NPO. We share a common interest in medicine, and occasionally chat over tea at a cafe. Mary, you're truly a thoughtful person. Caitlin always says she's proud of you. When Barbara said that, I was a bit surprised. To think that Caitlin talks about me. At least she seems to be saying nice things, which is reassuring. After finishing dinner and taking a shower, I prepare for tomorrow. Tomorrow is a rare day off. I don't have any special plans, but I'm looking forward to relaxing a bit. Lying in bed, I find myself thinking about the invitation again. The wedding is next month already. Is there still time? Should I buy a dress? What would be a good present? What does Caitlin need? With these thoughts, I fell asleep. On the morning of the wedding day, I woke up early. The soft morning sun streaming through the window dyed the room a pale orange. Today is my sister Caitlin's special day. The invitation never arrived, but I believed that as family, of course I would attend. That's what I wanted to believe. From my closet, I took out the pastel blue dress I had specially purchased last month. It was my father's favorite color. It wasn't expensive, but for someone living a modest life like me, it was a bit of a luxury. Standing before the mirror, I fixed my appearance, carefully arranging my hair in an updo. I attached pearl earrings, a keepsake from my father, to my earlobes, completing a simple but elegant look. At least today you look somewhat decent. Speaking to my reflection, my mother's voice echoed in my mind. Today of all days, I wanted to rebut her words that always criticized my appearance. On the bed lay a gift for Caitlin, a handmade blanket I had knitted over 2 months. White yarn with small blue flower patterns woven in, a design wishing for purity and happiness in married life. It was modeled after a legendary blanket that father had given mother when he proposed, or so the story goes. It was one of the few happy family memories I had heard from mother many times. I hope Caitlin likes it. I carefully wrapped the gift in paper and tied a ribbon. On the card I wrote simply, "Wishing you eternal happiness." Sometimes fewer words resonate more deeply. I called a taxi and headed to the luxury hotel downtown. The cityscape of Chicago visible from the car window was going about its usual daily routine. But my heart was filled with complex emotions. Joy, expectation, and anxiety were all mixed together. I wanted to celebrate my sister's special day, but I was also questioning why I never received an invitation. "Windsor Hotel," announced the taxi driver. "Thank you," I said. And after paying the fare, I took a deep breath and stepped into the hotel lobby. Luxurious marble floors, massive chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, flower arrangements decorated here and there. Just as mother had often said, Caitlin had chosen the finest venue. The wedding reception was set up at the entrance to a large hall with a balcony. A young female staff member greeted me with a warm smile. "Good morning. May I have the name on your invitation?" Trying to remain as natural as possible despite my nervousness, I said, "Mary Wilson." The staff member looked through the list, then carefully traced it with her finger to double-check. I could see her expression gradually clouding. "I'm sorry," but she hesitated for a moment, as if carefully choosing her words. "Your name isn't on the list." For a moment I thought there must be some mistake, a misunderstanding, or perhaps an omission. "Could you please check again?" "Mary Wilson. I'm the bride's sister." The staff checked the list again and even consulted quietly with a colleague. Her troubled expression told me this wasn't a simple mistake. "I'm very sorry. Your name isn't here, Miss Wilson." I felt a tightening sensation in my chest. Was this just an oversight, or a possibility I didn't want to consider crossed my mind? There must be some mistake. "Is my mother, Eleanor Wilson, inside?" The staff nodded apologetically and replied, "Yes, Mrs. Wilson is already in the venue." Still holding the gift, I entered the venue with permission. Many guests had already gathered in the elaborately decorated hall. Among the sea of unfamiliar faces, I searched for my mother. And then I found her, enjoying a conversation with a smile, champagne glass in hand. Feeling my heartbeat quicken, I slowly approached her. When mother noticed me, she momentarily froze her expression, but quickly turned to smile to those around her and ended her conversation. I quietly asked, "They told me at reception that my name isn't on the list. Is there some mistake?" Eleanor looked me up and down as if appraising my outfit, then put on a cold smile. The familiar color of contempt floated in her eyes. "There's no mistake." Eleanor's voice was low but controlled so those around couldn't hear. "Did you honestly think you were invited? Outsiders aren't allowed in." Those words hurt more than I had expected. I thought I was mentally prepared, but I wasn't ready emotionally. Even if our relationship had cooled, I never thought I'd be excluded from an important family day. But what about Caitlin? Doesn't she want me here either? I felt my words tremble. Caitlin is about to begin a happy married life. She doesn't need reminders of failures like you. Eleanor's words stung like poison needles. But at that moment, I caught sight of a familiar figure in the corner of the venue. Barbara Johnson, Ryan's mother. She seemed to have overheard the conversation between Eleanor and me, and with surprised expression. I took a deep breath and suppressed my emotions. I couldn't let tears show. I didn't want to show weakness in front of my mother. "I see. I understand. Then I'll live my life as an outsider too." In a quiet but resolute voice, I said this and placed the gift I had been holding on the table. "This is for Caitlin. Would you give it to her? That is, if it's not too much of a burden for you." As I turned to leave, Barbara gently grabbed my arm. "Mary, wait. What's happening?" "Caitlin said she wanted you to come. She was talking about you just last week." I was confused, Barbara's words and Eleanor's attitude. Between these two incompatible stories, I couldn't determine the truth. "Barbara, this is a family matter. Please don't interfere," Eleanor admonished Barbara in a stern tone. "Barbara, it's all right," I interrupted her words. "Today is my sister's important day. I don't want to cause any problems." Barbara looked like she wanted to say something, but I gently smiled, squeezed her hand, and simply said thank you before leaving. When I stepped outside the hotel, the sky was clear, but my heart was in turmoil like a storm. I hailed a taxi and said, "I want to go home." The driver, seeing me holding back tears in the back seat, kindly started driving without asking any questions. Meanwhile, the wedding preparations had entered their final stage. Music was playing and guests were starting to take their seats. As the announcement signaling the start of the ceremony echoed, Eleanor's smartphone began to ring. At first, Eleanor tried to ignore it, but when the phone wouldn't stop ringing, she showed an apologetic expression to those around her and stepped outside the venue. She heard Caitlin's excited voice. "Where's Mary? I said I wanted to see her before the ceremony." Eleanor was momentarily at a loss for words. "She didn't come." Her own voice sounded hollow as she lied. "What? But Barbara says she saw Mary. She was at the venue." At that moment, Eleanor saw Barbara talking to Caitlin, her expression severe, apparently telling her the truth. When Eleanor returned to the venue, the ceremony had already begun. Caitlin, dressed in a beautiful wedding gown, was making her entrance. However, there seemed to be some hesitation in her expression. As the priest's words progressed, Caitlin suddenly looked around and stood up. "Where's Mary?" At Caitlin's question, the venue fell silent. Her voice mixed anxiety and confusion. Though beautiful in her pure white wedding dress, her expression showed clear distress. The groom, Ryan, stood up looking confused and whispered to Caitlin, "Kate, what's wrong? Let's continue the ceremony." "Wait, Ryan?" Caitlin shook her head. "Mary's not here. My sister isn't here." A small murmur spread among the guests. The priest looked around nervously, seemingly unsure how to respond. Barbara stood up and stepped forward. Her expression was stern, as if about to announce something serious. "Caitlin, Mary was here." But she chose her words carefully, glancing briefly at Eleanor. She left. "What? What do you mean?" Caitlin's voice trembled. Barbara took a deep breath and quietly continued. "Mary was told her name wasn't on the guest list and wasn't allowed into the venue." The color drained from Caitlin's face, turning pale. She looked at Eleanor with a trembling voice. "Mom, what does this mean? Mary is my sister. Why did you remove her name from the invitation list?" Eleanor, conscious of the eyes around her, showed an uncomfortable expression. She shrank her body as if shrugging her shoulders, and began making excuses in a low voice. "Caitlin, this is your special day. If Mary came, she would try to steal the attention as always. I just wanted to prevent her from stealing the spotlight on your big day. She always needs to be the center of attention." Anger appeared in Caitlin's eyes. "That's not true. Mary has never been jealous of me or tried to steal attention. She's always supported me." Eleanor made a scoffing sound. "You just don't know her true nature. I was only trying to protect you." The murmuring in the venue grew louder, and Ryan looked at his parents with a confused expression. Robert Johnson, who had been sitting next to Barbara, stood up. He was a tall, dignified man who served as a senior partner at the law firm. "What is the meaning of this?" Robert's voice was low but powerful. "We thought today was a blessed day when two families would become one. But what's happening before our eyes is..." He cut off his words and stared intently at Eleanor. "I never thought we would welcome our children into a family like this. I don't want to be associated with people who exclude their own family." At those words, the venue froze in tension. Caitlin covered her face with both hands and began to shake her shoulders. The hem of her wedding dress spread across the floor, making her look both beautiful and sad. Ryan rushed to Caitlin's side without hesitation and embraced her shoulders. "It's okay, I'm here for you," he whispered gently and took her trembling hand. "I'm going to call Mary." Caitlin took out her smartphone through tears and dialed Mary's number. The ringtone continued, but there was no answer. "She's not answering." she muttered with a desperate expression. Ryan squeezed Caitlin's hand and said gently, "She's hurt. She needs time." Caitlin tried calling once more, but still no answer. She let out a deep sigh and raised her tear-soaked face. Then she began speaking to all the gathered guests. "Everyone, I'm truly sorry that things have turned out this way today." Her voice was shaking, but gradually regained its strength. "Actually, there's something I hadn't realized until now." She looked at Eleanor for a moment, then continued, "Mom has been keeping Mary away for months. She wanted me to think all my success was my own achievement, but I wouldn't be here today without Mary." While holding Ryan's hand, Caitlin began reflecting on her past. "I was able to go to law school because Mary helped with the tuition. She sacrificed her own career to care for Dad and support my dreams. When I went to my first job interview, she bought me a suit and practiced with me repeatedly." Many guests showed sympathetic expressions at Caitlin's words. Eleanor blushed and lowered her gaze to the floor. "And this dress I'm wearing today," Caitlin slightly lifted the hem of her wedding gown. "I wanted to consult with Mary when choosing it. But Mom said, 'Mary is busy.'" Her voice broke off, and fresh tears streamed down her cheeks. Barbara approached Caitlin and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Mary is truly a wonderful person." Barbara's voice was gentle. "She's always talking about how much she loves you. Every time we meet, she asks, 'How is Caitlin? Are her wedding preparations going well?'" At those words, Caitlin's expression crumbled further. "I'm the worst sister, taking everything Mary did for me for granted." Ryan stepped forward as if having made a decision. "Everyone, I apologize, but we're postponing today's ceremony." Various reactions spread through the venue, sounds of surprise, nods of understanding, and small sighs. "We believe a true wedding can only happen when the entire family is together," Ryan said with resolution. "Without Mary, Caitlin's sister, this ceremony is incomplete." Caitlin looked at Ryan with gratitude and squeezed his hand tightly. "Thank you," she whispered softly. Ryan's father, Robert, stepped forward and politely apologized to the gathered guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, despite many of you traveling from afar, we have come to this conclusion. Please understand our decision." Then he turned to Eleanor with a stern expression and said, "I cannot trust someone who doesn't value family. How could you do something so despicable?" Eleanor was at a loss for words, standing motionless. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled slightly. It was the moment when the false image she had built over the years crumbled in an instant. Caitlin lifted the hem of her wedding dress with one hand, clutching her smartphone with the other. "I need to find Mary. I need to apologize to her." Ryan nodded and placed his jacket over Caitlin's shoulders. "Let's go together." The two began walking toward the venue doors. On the way, Caitlin stopped, turned back and looked at Eleanor. "Mom, I can't easily forgive what happened today, but you are my mother. I hope there will be a day when we can reconcile." Eleanor couldn't say anything, just crying silently. Caitlin and Ryan held hands and left the venue. Behind them, Robert and Barbara were handling the guests. Barbara called out to Caitlin, "When you find Mary, tell her we send our love too." After the two left the venue, a beautiful sunset spread across the sky. Caitlin took a deep breath and said, "I know where Mary is," pulling Ryan toward the car. Mary's apartment was on the third floor of an old building in North Chicago. It was where she had once lived with her father, and she continued to live there after his death, cherishing the memories. From the window she could see a small park, the changing seasonal views her only comfort. Having returned from the wedding, Mary sat on the sofa by the window, still in her formal attire. Ignoring her constantly ringing smartphone, she just stared outside. In the park, children were playing, parents watching with smiles, a scene that made one feel the warmth of family. "Family?" Mary whispered softly. Something felt broken inside her after today's events. Tears had already dried up, leaving only emptiness in her heart. "I'll live as an outsider." She stood up and headed to the closet to take off her dress. She would probably never wear it again. Around 7 p.m., a sudden knock sounded at the door. Mary did not respond, hoping whoever it was would leave. But the knocking continued, and eventually voices were heard. "Mary, open up please." It was her sister Caitlin's voice. Mary didn't move. "Mary, we're here. Let us talk to you." This time it was Barbara's voice. Mary was confused. "Barbara's here too?" "Mary, I understand how you feel. But could you please open the door?" A male voice. "Probably Ryan." Mary hesitantly walked to the door. Looking through the peephole, she saw Caitlin, Ryan, and Barbara and Robert outside. Caitlin was still in her wedding dress, her eyes red and swollen. Taking a deep breath, Mary slowly opened the door. Mary. Caitlin couldn't wait and rushed in, clinging to Mary. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Her voice was hoarse with tears, her body trembling. Mary was surprisingly calm. Caitlin, what about your wedding? Why are you here? Ryan stepped forward and quietly explained. We postponed the ceremony. We felt a wedding without you would be meaningless. Mary was speechless. Ryan's parents also stood there, smiling gently. Barbara softly said, May we come in? Mary nodded silently and led everyone into the living room. The apartment was small, but she had created a warm space in her own way. Photographs of memories with her father adorned the walls, medical books and novels lined the bookshelf. Caitlin, still crying, took Mary's hand. I had no idea you were removed from the list. Please believe me. We learned the truth at the venue, Robert continued. His voice was calm, but remnants of anger could be felt. Your mother, Mom removed my name, Mary said in a flat voice. I'm not surprised. But why? Caitlin asked with a confused expression. Why would she do such a thing? Mary sat on the sofa and shrugged wearily. Mom has always loved you more than me. I was just a nuisance. That's not true, Caitlin raised her voice. And there's something even worse. With trembling hands, she took out her smartphone and began searching for something. Barbara told me, Mom has been lying to me about you for years. Lying? Look at this. Caitlin handed her smartphone to Mary. The screen displayed old text messages. Messages from Eleanor to Caitlin from 2 years ago. Mary says she can't come to your graduation. She's too busy. Don't worry, we'll celebrate just us. Mary's eyes widened. That's a lie. I applied for time off work that day. But Mom said you didn't want me to come. Caitlin showed another message. Birthday present from Mary? Nothing has arrived from her. Don't worry, she's always too busy with her own life. I sent presents every year. I asked Mom to give them to you. Mary's voice trembled. Mom has been lying to Caitlin for years, making her believe Mary was neglecting the family, Barbara quietly explained. She also had letters and gifts from Mary, deliberately destroying the sisters' relationship. Why didn't I notice? Caitlin said, blaming herself. I should have questioned what Mom was saying. I remember all you did for me. She took both of Mary's hands and looked at her with a serious expression. Law school tuition, the suit for my first job interview, nursing Dad during his illness. It was all thanks to you. And yet, tears welled up in Mary's eyes. She had never felt such complex emotions. Anger, sadness, relief, and love all mixed together. But why? Why would Mom go so far? Mary asked in a small voice. Ryan quietly said, I think Eleanor wanted to take all the credit for Caitlin's success. Mary's existence threatened that narrative. Mom was crying when we left the venue, Caitlin said. But honestly, I don't feel I can forgive her yet. Silence filled the room. Mary stared out the window, lost in thought for a long time. Then, slowly raising her face, she looked at her sister. You are my sister. That will never change. Mary's voice was soft but strong. What Mom did, it may take time to forgive. But it's not your fault. Caitlin showed an expression of relief and embraced Mary again. The sisters held each other for a long time, as if reclaiming the bond that had been lost for years. Ryan gently approached the two and said, Mary, we want you at our wedding. The postponed one, of course. I'd be delighted, Mary smiled. Her first genuine smile. Barbara placed a hand on Mary's shoulder and said kindly, You're already part of our family. We won't let anyone keep you away anymore. Robert nodded and added, In our house, family is treasured. That's what matters most. That night, they talked until late. Like filling in a gap created over years, they reminisced about the past. Mary spoke of memories with their father, Caitlin's childhood adventures, and the good times they had spent together. Remember, that summer when Dad took us to the lake? Mary said nostalgically. Of course. When I almost drowned and you jumped in to save me, Caitlin laughed. Dad called you our family hero after that. As the night grew late, Barbara and Robert decided to leave. We'll come again tomorrow, Barbara promised, and gave Mary a tight hug. Caitlin and Ryan stood up too, but Mary stopped them. Why don't you stay here tonight? I'll pull out the sofa bed. And so, the following Saturday, Caitlin and Ryan's wedding was held in a small garden. Only close friends and family were invited. This time Mary would stand beside her sister as the maid of honor. An invitation was also sent to Eleanor. At first, Mary hesitated, but decided, she is our mother, we shouldn't cut her off completely. That kindness is your most wonderful quality, Barbara said. The day before the wedding, Eleanor visited Mary's apartment. She looked older than before, with deep fatigue under her eyes. Mary? Eleanor struggled with words. Come in, Mary said quietly, and led her mother into the living room. I've come to apologize. Eleanor's voice was small and trembling. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted to tell you. Mary knew that Ryan's parents had persuaded Eleanor, fearing she might not be able to attend her son's wedding either. Still, it was the first time her mother had spoken words of apology. It will take time, Mary said honestly. But tomorrow is Caitlin's special day. Let's be at peace for her sake. Eleanor nodded silently. On the wedding day, while helping with preparations, Mary prepared a special gift. It was her father's keepsake, a beautiful sapphire necklace. Caitlin, this is for you. Mary handed the necklace to her sister. It's Dad's keepsake. He said he wanted you to wear it. Caitlin was too moved for words and simply embraced her sister. Dad would be happy, Mary said softly. The ceremony took place in an atmosphere of love and reconciliation. Eleanor sat quietly in her seat watching her daughters. Mary arranged the hem of Caitlin's dress, and the two smiled at each other. I'm so glad you're here, Caitlin whispered. I'm not going anywhere. I promise, Mary replied. Winter, 1 year later. Chicago was covered in snow. Mary returned to her apartment with tired steps after finishing her night shift at the hospital. When she opened the door, warm air and the small lights of the Christmas tree in the living room greeted her. Mary's life had changed significantly over the past year. Lunch with Caitlin once a week had become her routine, sometimes in the busy hospital cafeteria, sometimes at their favorite restaurant downtown. The two shared their daily lives and memories as if making up for lost time. Remember that doll you wanted for Christmas when you were 5? Mary asked at lunch last week, and Caitlin laughed nostalgically. Of course. I was waiting at the door for Dad to come home from work, and you said, Santa is busy, so he asked Dad to bring it. In reality, Mary had used her own savings to buy that doll, going shopping secretly without her father knowing. Her sister's smile was her greatest treasure. On the table was an invitation from Caitlin that had arrived recently. Merry Christmas. Please spend it with us at our home this year. The card had a handwritten postscript. I have something to tell you, something very special. Mary smiled. At lunch last week, Caitlin had hinted she was pregnant. There hadn't been an official announcement yet, but as a sister, Mary had intuited it. She couldn't have missed that special glow when she gently placed her hand on Caitlin's stomach. Meanwhile, her relationship with her mother Eleanor remained complex. Since the wedding, Eleanor had distanced herself from the family and lived alone. Once the belle of society, Eleanor found herself ostracized from social circles as her manipulations and lies became known to her friends. Occasionally, Mary would hear updates about her mother from Caitlin, but she had avoided meeting Eleanor directly. Mom is trying to change, Caitlin said last month, but it's not easy for her either. Eleanor had tried to contact Mary several times, but her messages and calls were brief and formal. Her pride prevented her from uttering words of genuine apology. Mary took a shower and brewed a warm cup of tea. Outside the window, snow was falling more heavily. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Before spending time at Caitlin and Ryan's home, she had a short shift at the hospital. Mary sat on the sofa and gazed at her father's photograph. Merry Christmas, Papa. This year will be a little different. The doorbell rang, and Mary checked the clock. 10 p.m. Who could it be at this hour? Looking through the peephole, she saw Eleanor standing there. Wearing a snow-covered coat and holding a small bag, her face showed a mix of anxiety and determination. Mary hesitantly opened the door. Mary. Eleanor's voice was small and trembling. Do you have time to talk? Mary thought for a moment, then quietly nodded. Come in, it must be cold. Eleanor came in, brushing off snow. She had changed from her once dignified appearance and now looked like just a tired middle-aged woman. Mary took her coat and led her to the living room. Would you like some tea? Thank you, Eleanor answered softly. The two drank tea in silence. Snow continued to dance outside the window. Eleanor tried to speak several times but stopped, and finally took a deep breath and began. Mary, I was a terrible mother. I'm truly sorry for hurting you. Tears welled in her eyes. For a long time I justified my actions and blamed others. But the truth is I was wrong. Mary remained still, just listening to her mother's words. You always sacrificed yourself for the family, taking care of your father, Caitlin's tuition. You were a much better parent than I was. Eleanor's voice shook, but I didn't want to admit that. I was afraid to face my own failures. She placed the small bag on the table. This isn't a gift. It's something I should return. When Mary opened the bag, inside was a small jewelry box. Opening it, she found diamond earrings that had been passed down from her maternal grandmother. After her father died, Eleanor had claimed they were lost. These belong to you. I stole them. Eleanor lowered her face. I'm truly sorry. After a moment of silence, Mary quietly said, Forgiveness isn't easy. I've been hurt by your words for a long time. She took a deep breath and continued. But perhaps we can restore our relationship step by step. A small light of hope appeared on Eleanor's face. Tomorrow, there's a Christmas dinner at Caitlin and Ryan's home. Will you come? Mary asked. You are inviting me? Eleanor looked surprised. Because we're family, Mary answered simply. Besides, Caitlin seems to have special news. The next day, Christmas Eve, Caitlin and Ryan's home was filled with warm light and laughter. Barbara and Robert had also come and were helping Caitlin with final preparations in the kitchen. When Mary arrived, her sister came rushing out to greet her. Mary, you came. Of course, Mary laughed. Oh, and Mom is coming too. Caitlin was a bit surprised but quickly smiled. Really? That's wonderful. Ryan, set one more place. A few minutes later, Eleanor appeared with small gifts. She greeted everyone with a nervous expression, looking particularly humble toward Barbara and Robert. Barbara smiled and offered Eleanor a warm cup of cinnamon tea. We all make mistakes. What matters is the courage to acknowledge them and try to change. Before dinner, Caitlin and Ryan gathered everyone for a special announcement. Everyone, we have wonderful news, Ryan said proudly. Caitlin is pregnant. In 5 months, we'll become parents. Amid the congratulations echoing around the room, Caitlin took Mary's hand. Mary, I want you to be the godparent. Having someone with your kindness and strength beside this child, Mary nodded with tears in her eyes. I'd be honored. I'll love this child with all my heart. Eleanor sat quietly, but tears also glistened in her eyes. And Mom, Caitlin continued, I want you involved in this child's life as a grandmother. The past is the past. What matters is what comes next. After dinner, Mary was alone by the window, watching the snow scene. Eleanor quietly approached. What a lovely family, she murmured. It's thanks to you, Mary. Your kindness and thoughtfulness became the power that reconnected the family. Mary smiled. It's thanks to all of us. Family doesn't work with just one person. Ultimately, Mary's patience and love broke the chain of hatred and brought a new beginning. As her father had taught her, the power of forgiveness is immeasurable. Eleanor, after a long journey, began to understand the pain her actions had caused. She is now making daily efforts to become a true mother. It's not easy, but it's her own path of atonement to restore family bonds. That night, when the whole family took a commemorative photo, Mary spoke to her father in her heart. Can you see, Papa? We've become a family again, in a different way, but definitely a family. Outside the window, snow continued to fall gently. The wounds of the past weren't completely healed, but a new light of hope quietly shone upon this reborn family.